Hi, all. DT Neal here, writer, thinker, storyteller, ponderer of the imponderables, uh, preoccupied with things in genre, fantasy, horror, science fiction. In this case, talking a little bit more about science fiction and also scientific stuff. Um, Specifically, I've done a couple posts already about how I think space colonization is a lift that is going to require absolute reimagining human civilization in some way, way beyond our current existence. And I'm not going to go back on that. But I also think, we are unlikely, even if we get our act together as a species, we're unlikely to be able to colonize more than the solar system, which would be, if that happened, a massive, massive human achievement. But the distances involved beyond that, it gets prohibitive. And so even the best case scenario of us somehow coming together as a species on this planet, working together to colonize space, it's still unimaginably complex and logistically terrifying in a way. But I'm not even going to talk about that. That's all prelude. The thing I was really going to talk about a bit is the idea of the Great Filter, which you may or may not be aware of. It's really a synthesis of the idea of the Fermi paradox, which is, I think people have heard enough about that by now, and the Drake equation. Both of those things involve accounting for what they call the Great Silence. Like, why have we not encountered other alien civilizations? Why have we not heard them? Why don't we see them? Where are they? Are we alone in this universe? And while on one hand, I think, in terms of probability, it seems unbelievable that we could be alone in this entire galaxy and universe and all that. It seems almost unimaginably bleak to think that we are alone in that fashion. However, the Great Filter is a terrifying concept, really, depending on which side of the Great Filter you are. And this idea of this basically a conceptual existential brick wall that a civilization might run into that prevents them from moving beyond that limitation. An easy example to think about is that you could take a civilization that develops nuclear technology, like we have, and they engage in a nuclear war and they destroy their civilization through nuclear annihilation. Another example, which is all up in the news, is artificial intelligence. The idea of creating an artificial intelligence of sufficient intellect that it, for whatever reason, leads to the extinction of its creators. Okay, those are like great filters in that idea that's saying, well, maybe this civilization X on this other world developed an AI, the AI destroyed them and they're gone. Or they engaged in a nuclear war, or they polluted their environment so badly that they destroyed themselves. There's any number of things. And a lot of people who talk about the Great Filter idea think about, well, if we've already passed the Great Filter, whatever that Great Filter is, which is like saying, multi-celled organisms versus single-celled organisms. Like, if that was a Great Filter, we've passed that long ago, and so we're potentially in good shape. If, on the other hand, the Great Filter is ahead of us, and we haven't yet hit that wall, then it's really terrifying because the odds are against us. So hypothetically, if our world, if being a nuclear planet is a Great Filter, then we could be in great danger down the road. Some insane, really stupid, probably theocratic, maniacal leader might start a nuclear Armageddon, and then we wipe ourselves out. Or some thoughtless opportunist in the technological realm might design this AI that somehow exceeds the expectations and plans of the creators of it, and then it wipes us out for whatever reason. It could be accidental, it could be deliberate. So if that filter is ahead of us, it's really scary because we could be facing the limits of our existence as a species, as a planet. The planet would go on in some fashion, but the idea of us as a civilization on that planet could be in great danger if that filter is ahead of us. And in everybody's busy day, and when they're not necessarily thinking about where we're going and what we're doing. But I will say, from a fiction writer perspective, especially science fiction, it is interesting, in my opinion, that to watch, having read books for decades of my life and seeing the themes and the ideas that have moved through. And I've talked about this, I think, elsewhere, but there's this idea that soon you get to a point where science fiction has run into its own brick wall. And is that a reflection of a great filter? And I've talked about it when I refer to techno fantasy and that idea of science fiction still using scientifically credible terms and ideas in things that are not space opera, but thinking about the stuff that they have to carry to create a credible narrative, and how increasingly we come up to this wall where you can't really see beyond that point. And again, it does kind of shake out to either we get our act together as a species and we begin to successfully colonize space, or we don't, and we just are here and we will eventually go extinct, like 99.9% of other species on this planet. And I guess it feels to me on some level that we have a great filter ahead of us. And the thing is, there's no frame of reference because we haven't seen life on other worlds yet. I mean, we just haven't. We haven't seen definitive proof of anything living outside of it. And if we do see those things, they could be both awe-inspiring and also terrifying, because it probably harkens to a great filter in our future. And watching stuff, especially in the United States, situations where there is violent ignorance at play, hostility to intellect, hostility to the new and unfamiliar, violent rejection of progress. One can look at those things and go, wow, that's a potential path to a great filter, and something that might end up destroying us as a species if we just are unable to get past that. The idea that genocide is still occurring in the 21st century, and being perpetrated, the wars are still existing in some fashion. Those are very disturbing things ultimately. And from again, science fiction perspective, it makes me feel like we haven't yet hit that great filter. And if we haven't, we can be in a whole lot of trouble as a species, because and it really is, like I said earlier, it's like a brick wall. It's something that will require an astounding level of enlightenment and insight for us to bypass, if we even can. And that's the thing, and that can account for that great silence, and that others, maybe other civilizations, other species, alien species, have come up against it and they weren't able to get past it, which could account for the great silence. You see what I'm saying? I get it. There's a little bit of cosmic horror in there, or maybe a lot, in that idea of the great filter and what it means. And it's impossible to look at the level of pollution in the world, the level of, again, atrocities being committed and things, and not feel a great sense of terror and horror at the potential fate of the human race. So just something to brighten your day and think about.